Lay down. Here. Hey, lay down. There you go. There you go. All right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining me. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, go ahead and post them. It'll be below the video if you're on a smaller screen. If you're on a larger screen, it should be to the right of the video. All right. So let's see here. We got some questions in there already. Good deal. All right. So Drew asks, I have my driver at 8 degrees, get my launch, and yet my launch angle is still 18 to 20. How can I get lower than that? Good question. So it really just depends on why it's launching so high. So there's some typical things that are going on there. So number one would be possibly where you're striking it on the face. Understand about the driver is that the face is domed, right? So higher on the face, there's going to be more loft. So that 8 degrees, right? That's from the center of the club face. If we go higher on the face, it can be 11 degrees up there higher on the face. The other thing that happens when you hit it higher on the face is the face will actually twist. It will twist upward like that, and it will add more loft. So if you're high on the face, the ball is going to go higher. So I would get some foot powder spray. You can actually see I've got some foot powder spray, some old foot powder spray on here, but you can kind of see the dimples on the face from some strikes. That's going to give you a clear indication of what's going on there. So it could be that you're striking it very high on the face, and that's why the ball is going very, very high. So if that is the case, there's some things you can do there. One would be teeing the ball lower, right? If you tee the ball lower, it puts it lower on the face, right? So that could be one. And then if you already kind of have the ball teed somewhat low, then and you're still maybe you're kind of getting into the turf a little bit, hitting it high on the face, then I would just try to change your intention to hitting it low on the face. Right? Because right now you're trying to hit it in the center and you might be hitting it super high on the face. So if that's the case, change your intention to hitting it low on the face, and that will get those strikes more in the center. You may even feel like you're kind of topping it a little bit. So yeah, I definitely try that. Another thing that can be going on is you can be releasing early, right? So if you're coming into impact and you're releasing the club early and you're adding a lot of loft, right? That's going to make the ball go higher. Right, because the driver already has 8 degrees of loft on it, right? So if you flip, right, and early release the club, then you're going to add a lot of loft. So working through the top speed golf system and getting that club to release more out in front instead of at the ball. So we would want it to kind of come in, and here's my contact with the ball. I like to see the shaft pretty much straight up and down or just slightly forward at impact. So we're talking like a degree or two forward. If you're coming in and this shaft is leaning backwards at impact, you're adding loft, right? So we want to come in, and here would impact be. So my shaft's pretty much straight up and down, maybe slightly forward, and then I'm releasing it about right in that area. So when I say the release, I'm talking about where that club is splitting my forearms there. So that's what I'd be looking at. And an easy way to check that would be just to look at it on video. Use your phone. Most phones these days have great cameras on them, slow motion cameras that you can easily see impact. And you can also see if you're striking it high on the face on. You can typically tell if you have a slow motion camera on your phone, you can typically tell where that strike is as well. And that could be a good learning experience too, to kind of see what happens when you hit it higher on the face, sometimes you can kind of see how the face twists up and adds loft and things like that. So that might be a cool thing to look at if you have something like that you can do that with, like your phone. So that's what I'd be doing. And if you happen to be early releasing the club, really what you got to do is you just got to work through the top speed golf system and work toward that straight line release course where we work on getting the release out in front. But every course leading up to the straight line release course is a prerequisite for that course. So You can't really go directly to the straight line release course and start working on that, because if the other pieces that are prerequisites for that course, so your stable fluid spine, your power turn, your lag, and your compression line, if those 4 things aren't really in place, you're going to have a hard time working through the release. So I'd be working through the level 1s at each of those courses, and then get to the straight line release course where you're going to be able to more easily release that club out in front. So check that out. Work on those courses to get to the straight line release course. If you are ready for that, if the other pieces are in place, you can click the instruction tab at the top, then click the top speed golf system, and then click the straight line release course, or whatever course you need to start with to get you on the right track. But that's what I'd be looking at. All right. So I'll have Sam says, hi Q, can review shoulder alignment at address. Should they always be square with the line that your ankles make? So for example, if your alignment right of the target for a draw, then your shoulders should be too. Yeah. So basically you want to have everything nice in good alignment. That doesn't mean that you can't have your shoulders slightly open. It really come down steep and over the top. They're set up with very open shoulders like this, and it just kind of sets you up to do that. So if you're someone who sets up open and you don't have any kind of issues, with coming down over the top, you shallow the club nicely, then don't worry about it, right? Because however you're lining up is working out just fine. But if you're someone who's coming down steep over the top, having trouble, kind of hitting weak slice, fades and things like that, or chopping down into the golf ball, you may want to look at getting everything kind of more squared up, right? So having, my knees kind of squared up with my hips and my shoulders. And when I have those shoulders square, right, with everything kind of squared up, I need to have some spine tilt. The reason for that is that my trail hand is lower on the club, right? So if I don't have any spine tilt, I have to kind of reach out with my hand, right, with my trail hand. And when I reach out, that opens my shoulders. So I need to have some spine tilt. That way I can put my trail hand lower on the grip without losing the squareness of my shoulders and everything. And this just sets you up to make it a lot easier to swing that club from the inside typically. So yes, I would try to have everything more lined up generally. But hey, like I said, if you're getting the club in a great position, you're shallowing it out, you're getting it to come down the way that you want to, then that it's not really necessary to square up your shoulders if that is the case. But it's usually not. Usually you are going to be coming over the top when that happens. All right. So Deb C says the direction of my divots are left. When I try to get my path to come from the inside, the club face is open and balls go right. I also tend to hit fat shots this way. What section of the system should I check out? So Deb, what I would recommend that you do is work through the shallowing video that we sent out earlier this week. I'll put a link to it. I would recommend you work through this. Where did it go? I had it just a second ago. Let me. So link for this in the chat. So check that out. That's what I would recommend you work through that course. One thing to keep in mind is that when we swing more from the inside, right, you're going to tend to hit the ground sooner, right? So we have to make sure that we're getting to our lead side when we do that. If you're someone who swings over the top, a lot of times you will stay on your back foot, because if you shifted your weight forward, you would hit too far in front of the golf ball. So what people will do is they'll stay on their back foot and they'll swing over the top. So make sure that you're getting into the lead side. I try to feel like in the start of the downswing, right? In the downswing here, I want you to feel like you're crushing a can underneath your lead foot, like you just finished a can of Coke and you want to smash that can, put it underneath your foot. In the start of the downswing, I want you to feel like you're starting the downswing with that feeling. So really, really helps you to get to your lead side if you have that feeling of putting pressure into that lead foot. So that I recommend but work through that drill. You probably need to get a stronger grip. That's something that Clay talks about, finding that natural strong grip for you. And then getting that club to work from the inside by using a constraint like an impact bag or a pillow. There's all kinds of things that you can use. So check out that video. Clay walks you through exactly what you need to do to get what you want out of it. So Dan W says, I tend to hit the ball out toward the toe of the club. Any ideas on how to improve that? Really, the first thing to do is just to, without really knowing the root cause as to why you're doing that. A lot of times people who are swinging over the top tend to hit the ball off the toe, because when you swing over the top, right, when you swing over the top like this, the sweet spot of the club's kind of working toward you, right? So that's going to bring the toe more into play. So if you're coming down steep and over the top, you may want to work on getting the club to work from the inside, and that may get the strikes more in the center of the face. If that is the case with what is happening, if you look at your video and you see you're over the top steep, I'd recommend work through that video that I just posted in there for Deb, because that you likely need the same thing to get that club working from the inside. Because if I get the club working from the inside, then what happens, right? Now the sweet spot's working out away from me back, and that's going to get it to be more in the heel, right? So obviously we don't want to swing too far from the inside, but if we find that happy medium, that's going to get that strike more in the center of the face. So that's what I would look at possibly with what's going on now. If you're coming down, that club's in a great position, and you're hitting the ball off of the toe, then what you need to do is simply adjust your intention to hitting it off the heel, right? Center of the face, and keep doing that until you actually start hitting the ball off the heel. So it's really what it is. It's just adjusting your feel to get the desired result that you want, right? So that's what I would recommend doing beyond that. If you're having trouble doing that, some people have a little bit of trouble doing that, trying to hit a bad shot in order to hit a good shot. Understand how that can be kind of like an oxymoron in your head. But if you commit, it really makes it a lot simpler. But if you really have trouble with that, there are a couple things that you can do. So number one would be to do a drill where you're actually trying to hit something else, right? So if you're struggling with toe strikes, that means that your club's coming in like this. So you need to imagine like you're hitting something out in this area in the center of the face. So what you can do is you can use a tee and place a tee in the ground. And this would be while you're practicing. Obviously, you wouldn't be able to do this on the course. So it'd be cheating, right? But when you're practicing, what you can do is you can place a tee in the ground just out like an inch outside your golf ball. And then you set up to your golf ball. And then I would try to really focus on clipping that tee out of the ground. And then once you start getting those strikes more in the center of the face or even toward the heel, what you can do is you can remove the tee, but still imagine that it's there and try to hit that. And that's kind of a way to kind of trick your brain into adjusting your feel, right, to get the desired result that you want. So that's one thing you can do. The other thing you can do would be an avoidance drill. So the way that would work to get the strikes more toward the heel, what you can do is you can place a head cover on this side of the ball, right? So if I grab a head cover right here, what I can do is I can place this right here, and now I want to have the feeling that it's there, right? I want to imagine in my head that head cover is still there, and I still want to avoid it as I'm coming through to get those strikes more in the center of the face. So those would be some things that I would do to get your strikes a little bit more solid there. So Drew, it looks like Drew reposted his question. Drew, it looks like you may have missed the answer to your question. If you want to see the answer, I'm not going to repeat the answer. So if you want to check that out, you can check out the archived office hours after the office hours are over. To find the archived office hours, all you have to do is click the office hours tab at the top, then click the office hours highlights. And then if you scroll down to the bottom of the office hours highlights page, you will find the archived office hours where you can watch on the beginning of this video. I'll have Sam says, do you know how to change it so it appears instead of my email? What you should be able to do is click the in the lower left-hand corner, there should be like an icon there that looks kind of like a power icon. It's like a circle with a line on the bottom. If you select that, that will log you out of the chat. And then when you log back in, make sure to put in your first name and last initial to get it to change back. That's my understanding of how it works. If you can't get it to work that way, then contact our support team to ask about that. And there, you can contact them at support@topspeedgolf.com to get that, to see if they can get that to work better for you. He says, sometimes when I chip, the ball goes low and right. Sounds like you may be hitting it thin and off the toe, maybe a little bit. Hard to say without seeing your swing exactly what's going on, but I would use some foot powder spray and see where you're striking it on the face with those chips, and try to get those chips more in the center of the face. You know, adjust your feel to get the desired result that you want there. So Tom M says, there are several YouTube videos that claim a real fast backswing tempo results in more power distance, similar to what Bryson does. Any truth to this? Yes, absolutely. The more, so basically what's happening is that the more pressure you can apply in your trail foot early and get, and get loading up and wound up. A lot of times when we swing faster in the backswing, if we have the feeling of adding more pressure, we'll actually get a little bit more turn with it. And the more pressure that you put into your trail foot, pressure that you can apply into your lead foot and create force in the downswing. So that's really what's typically going on there. So pressure early trail foot, really get that club swinging up there. And the faster we can get the club up there, the more we can kind of basically unweight ourselves. And then the more we can really get into the ground and be able to create force into the ground, right? So what you have to understand is why a fast backswing does that, right? So if you just swing fast without understanding the reason why, it may not do anything. So what I would try to feel like is that you get pressure early, and that faster backswing really gets momentum to help you turn more and to kind of unweight yourself as you get up to the top, so that way you can apply more force in the downswing. That's really how you use a fast backswing to create more speed. So, it does take some, athleticism and coordination to be able to do that, right? Because they feel like the timing is going to be off with everything and things like that. So I wouldn't say everyone's going to benefit from a faster backswing. But if you can use it in the correct way to apply pressure early and get more momentum going up the top and unweighting yourself so you can apply more force in the downswing with the ground, then you can create more speed in the downswing. Jerry B says, I think the link is broken. They must have taken it off of the website. Basically, Deb, what you need to work on is the move. That's what so I'd recommend going to the move course, click the instruction tab. Then it was my impression that we were going to leave the trial thing up, but they may have taken it down for some reason. So as for that, but basically that trial video is for the new course that we're working on. Or that Clay is working on for shallowing out the club. It's just kind of a more refined version of the move, essentially. So if you want to check out the move, what we have on there now, it's basically the same thing. Just click the instruction tab, then the Top Speed Golf System, then the move, work through those drills. And I would recommend with that. So the main difference, or something that we found with a lot of experience, is that these wrist motions can be difficult to do. Right. So strength, doing these kind of motions that we talk about in the move course. So flexing that lead wrist and extending that trail wrist, that can be a difficult thing to do for a lot of players. So we still need to have good wrist angles, but generally it's easier. It's much, much easier to have a stronger grip and not have to do as extreme wrist angles. What I find with a lot of players who struggle with getting that face square, they set up with a very weak grip. So what I mean by that, and I'll put a glove on just to make it easier to kind of see what's going on. So when I say a weak grip, what that means is I'm not talking about, how hard, how much pressure we're putting into the handle, right? I'm talking about how our hands are positioned onto the club. So one thing you can kind of look at is the thumbs, right? So if my thumbs are going straight down the top of the shaft, which is the way a lot of people grip the club, that would be considered a very weak grip, right? Now, there are plenty of players out there that have weak grips and play fantastic golf. So just to name a few, Colin Morikawa, Victor Hovland, who else has a really weak grip? But those are a couple that come to my mind right away. Matt Wolff would be another person. So these players have weak grips and play great golf, but what they have to do at impact is very difficult for most people to do. So at impact, if I have a weak grip, right, so my thumbs are going basically straight down the shaft here, right, or even kind of on this side of the shaft, right? If that is happening, when I get to impact, right, I have to have a ton of bow in my lead wrist. Like this is what Colin Morikawa looks like at impact. So in order to half lean and square up that face, I have to have a lot of bow in that wrist, and to retain that all the way to impact is a very, very difficult thing for a lot of players to do. It's very, very difficult. So it's a lot easier to have a stronger grip where our thumbs are more on the side of the grip, right? And that's a more natural, powerful grip for most people. If I'm like that, now when I get to impact and I shaft lean, now look at my wrist. I can have my wrist more in a flat position, which is a heck of a lot easier for most players to do. Now, we still can't come into impact and really cup our lead wrist like that. We have to have more of a flat wrist, but having a flatter lead wrist, a slightly bowed wrist, is a heck of a lot easier than having a ton of bow into that wrist at impact, like we see Colin Morikawa, Victor Hovland, and players like that. Bryson DeChambeau would be another player. He has a lot of bow in his lead wrist at impact. So it's just a very difficult thing for most players to do. So I would say on top of using the move, what I'd recommend doing is strengthening your grip. You play around with a really much stronger grip, and you'll likely have much better results or much more success with the move. So that's what I'm doing. So sorry that the link doesn't work. I was under the impression that that was going to be left on the site for a while, but they must have made a decision to take it down. So sorry about that. So Jerry B says, on my divot board, it appears that my iron toe is hitting first. Sometimes, does that mean I was off plane? It certainly could. Mainly, what it most likely means is that you're kind of coming in toe down, right? So the handle's kind of coming in higher. This is pretty common amongst a lot of players, because if you have an early release, right, meaning when you come into contact, this club's kind of you don't have a lot of shaft lean. The club's kind of releasing out in this area just in front of the ball. So again, when I say release, I'm talking about where this club is coming in and kind of splitting my forearms. When we look at better players, right, when we look at PGA Tour players and, plus handicap players, scratch players, typically what we're seeing is that release is happening out in front, right? So it's more like that, right? So that's where that club's splitting my forearms. And if you rewind that to impact, right, you can see how there's shaft lean there. When you have shaft lean, you're going to have this handle a little bit lower, right? Because your hands are going to be lower. And then that club is going to come in more flush to the ground, right? So if you early release and stand up, then that toe is going to be more down, and you're going to have more, kind of toe down kind of divots. So that's more than likely what's going on. So working through the top speed golf system, and then working your way through up to the straight line release, getting that club to release out more out front can help you to get those divots a little bit better. So Drew says, I got it. Thanks. Sorry about Oh, no worries, Drew. Glad you're able to get it and don't have to wait for the archived ones. So Tom M. Tom says, thanks, Q. It always helps to know why you should instead of just do this and it works. No problem, Tom. What was that in? Oh, yeah. Oh, I 100% agree. Yeah. So that's something that I really try to drive home with do this. Now, if a student wants that, that's fine. But generally, I like to have students know the reason why, because one, it helps them buy in more, and two, it's learning, right? You know, I don't get to the point where I have where a student fires me. That's literally what I want. I want to get fired, but I want to get fired in the right way. But I want to get fired because I want you to be able to coach yourself, right? I want you to get to the point where you don't need me anymore and you're good to go. And maybe you come back to me, you know, every now and then when for a tune-up or whatever it might be. But I want you to get to the point to where you have to fire me. So that can only happen in the best way possible if you understand what's going on and you learn how to kind of fix it, right? So that's one thing that I really like about online lessons is that it forces the student to work through it and to work through it on their own and learn what's going on. There is something to be said for in-person lessons where the instructor is, you know, maybe moving you around and making sure you're doing it every time. I think that definitely is a good thing. But sometimes the bad thing about that is that you know, sometimes the student doesn't really learn much, right? And they don't learn how to get through it. Whereas if you have an instructor tell you, hey, this is what I'm seeing, this is what you need to do to fix it, and then you have to go work through it and do it. I think that's extremely valuable, and I think people will gain a lot more from doing that sort of thing. All right, so let's keep going. So Deb C says, in chipping, how close to the ball should you? How upright should the shaft be? Should the heel be slightly up? So good questions there. So for chipping, it really just depends on what kind of shot you're trying to hit, right? So if you're trying to hit more of kind of like a bump and run kind of shot, then you know, a shot that's not really going to be a spinny kind of shot, then you can have the shaft more upright. You can have it standing up a little bit more. And when you have the shaft standing up a little bit more, that's going to put the toe more down. And I would actually play the ball a little slightly toward the toe, just a little bit. Because if you play it in the center of the face, because now if you have a lie where it can, you know, where the ball's sitting up, you can play it in the center. But if you're playing from like the fairway where, you know, the ball may not be like sitting up like it's on a tee, you may want to play it just slightly toward the toe a little bit and try to hit it off the toe just slightly. All right. Not so much that it's going to deaden it so much. It's still going to be pretty solid from there, but enough to where you're still going to be able to get, you know, if you have the toe sitting down a little bit, then it helps you get under the ball a little bit more. So, but I would kind of feel like it just like kind of like, almost like a putt, right? So you can have the handle a little bit more in the lifeline of your hand, right? So if I'm trying to hit like a bump and run shot with you know, with my wedge here, right? Or this could be an 8 or a 9 iron. I might stand this up a little bit, have the toe off the ground a little bit. I might play the ball, like I said, I might play the ball slightly toward the toe, you know, so that would look something like that. So you can see how that's just slightly toward the toe. I'm talking like a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch at most, maybe. But like a 1/4 inch toward the toe, I think is good, right? And now I'm just going to kind of swing back and through almost as if I was making a putt. Now, the difference between this and a putting stroke is I don't want you to be all arms with it. You know, a putting stroke, it's mainly just shoulders, right? So with this, we're actually going to let the legs move a little bit, right? So because the reason why we want to do that is that these swings are typically longer than a putting stroke, right? And we're making interaction with the ground, so we need a little bit more speed with it, right? So I like to see the body kind of move a little bit. So see how my knees move around a little bit? That's completely fine. Let your hips swivel, let those knees move around, and you're going to find it's a lot easier to make these strokes when you do that. All right. So how close you stand to it, you know, give yourself some room, right? You want to have about a fist width in between. right? So choke up on the club a little bit, get the grip a little bit more in the hands, right? Instead of in the fingers. It's going to stand the shaft up a little bit, play it a little bit off the toe, let those knees kind of move around a little bit. You'll make some really, really good contact. So yeah, toe and then shaft lean. Yeah, so your hands are just going to be slightly forward, right? So if I'm playing the ball right here, I'm going to be set up like this. Ball's going to be roughly in the middle of my stance there. And you can see how I just have a little bit of shaft lean there, just a little bit. And I'm just going to hands in front of the ball. So I'm going to swivel back and through. And that's just a simple bump and run kind of shot. And you can do that with pretty much any club in the bag. I mean, people hit shots like that with 3-woods even. All right, let's keep going here. So Tom M says, Q, I have watched solution swings of half a dozen of the touring pros, Jason Day, Oosthuizen, others, who don't seem to practice the move. No obvious shallowing. I conclude not all great players have to do this, or am I wrong? Maybe this is just a feel or exaggeration for we hackers to practice to improve our swings. So that's a good point. So one thing to keep in mind is that every single tour player is shallowing out the club. Every single one. So even Louis Oosthuizen and Jason Day. So when we're talking about shallowing out the club, really what's happening is the club is getting behind the hands, right? So just because they're not going up the top and then going like this, right, that doesn't mean that they're not shallowing out the club. If you watch the path of the hands versus the path of, you can think of it, it's really the center of mass of the club, which would be kind of like in this area right here. But you can think of it as the club head. So watch, if you have something to analyze swings like an app like V1 Golf, it's a free app, or there's lots of apps out there. But if you can look at a tour player swing and then compute is at the top of the swing, I want you to track where the butt end of the club is going, right? So butt end of the club, and then track how the club head is moving in relationship to that, right? So every single tour player has the club head is moving in a shallower position to the butt end of the club, every single one. Because if they didn't do that, not be tour players, because they would be very, very inconsistent, because they would have to make some sort of compensation, or they would hit slices. They'd have just no control of what's going on, right? So, the movement oftentimes is subtle. If you look at Tiger Woods, Adam Scott, there's no blatant look of, whoa, that shaft is really flattening out. But if you watch how the club head is reacting to where the butt end of the club is moving, you will see that the club head is moving, it's shallowing to the handle. That's really what has to happen, right? So, and there are some players that start down steep and then shallow it out later. So two players that come to mind that are very good players. One would be Phil Mickelson, and the other would be Gary Woodland. So Phil Mickelson, Phil Mickelson is what I would call an outlier. From a technical standpoint, now don't get me wrong, Phil Mickelson he's doing the top speed golf, right? But from a technical standpoint, he probably has the worst swing of any, and from a mechanical standpoint, his swing really isn't great, right? Now, I would kill to have Phil Mickelson swing, right? I'm not saying that it's a bad swing. What I'm saying is that when you look at his swing technically compared to like a Tiger Woods, right, or any of the other greatest players out there, Jack Nicklaus, Gary Player, right, any of the greats, right? If you look at his swing compared to those, his swing would be really low. I do not use his swing as a model very often because of the way that he shallows out the club. So when he starts his downswing, he actually cups this lead wrist, and really kind of down cocks the club, and the club actually comes down steep initially, but then his hands kind of move out toward the ball and he drops it underneath, right? A lot of times the face is very open, and if you watch Phil, he really has to roll his hands over hard to save the face as he's coming through on contact. That's why Phil Mickelson is not, compared to PGA Tour players, other PGA Tour players, he's not a great driver of the golf ball. That's why, it took him, remember, there was a long time there where he was one of the best players on the PGA Tour, but he hadn't won a major. And the reason for that is that when the stakes were the highest and the nerves were the biggest, right? And, it throws off, it just makes it harder to time things. And that's, his swing is very dependent on timing. Now, when you're an exceptional athlete like Phil Mickelson, like an incredible, the guy probably has the best hands of anyone ever. Hand-eye coordination. Of anyone ever on the PGA Tour, he probably has the best. So that's why he's won 40-some tournaments. I think he's won 45 times on the, because the guy has incredible hand-eye coordination. So not everyone's going to be equipped with that. In fact, almost nobody, basically nobody, is equipped with the amount that he has. So, but that being said, he still shallows out the club. He just does it later, and he's steep early and then shallow late, and that's obviously it works for him. But I tell you what, if he shallowed out earlier, I think I don't know. It's hard to say. You can't rewrite history, right? But it's basically when you have really high end players like that, you're very hesitant to change things like that, because it can make things really difficult. So if you have a player that where it's obviously that's never going to work, then yeah, it's a good change to make. But if you have a great player, then sometimes not messing with something like that is the best thing to do. I'm guessing that's what the coaches of Phil Mickelson have done, right? Just worked on other things to improve. So, but yeah, that's part of the reason why he has such a great short game. He's one of the best because he has some of the best hands, right? He's very, very good at using his hands. So, so yeah, Phil Mickelson is he's probably the greatest steep player. He is the greatest player that comes down steep initially and then shallows it out late. But all tour players, even him, shallows it out. Gary Woodland, another one. Gary Woodland is an exceptional athlete, probably has incredible hand-eye coordination. He definitely does, right? He played college basketball, right? So, he's an exceptional athlete. Again, another guy that starts down steep, shallows it out late. He has the club head. He has the club in a little bends coming down. The face is a little bit more square as he's coming down, as opposed to Phil. The face is a little bit more open. He doesn't have to, roll the hands over hard as much. He keeps that face a little bit more stable, and he really likes to hit fades. Gary Woodland does. So, and that kind of works. Obviously, that works for him. So yeah. So just some information there, but yeah, all players are shallow, even though it's not a drastic shallowing of the club kind of thing. They're definitely, all players, all good players are shallowing out the club. And the reason why that's really important is because of the forces that are involved with doing that. We have to have the club behind the hands if we are going to be any good. The club has to be behind the hands. If the club gets out in front of the hands, then you just don't have any control of it. So the way that you can kind of look at that is imagine, it's the same reason why we want to pull a trailer behind our truck and we don't push the trailer in front of the truck, right? If you get on the interstate with the trailer hooked up to the back of your truck, you can go fast, and it's just going to go right in line with the direction that you're driving the truck. Now imagine you get on the interstate with going right, and you got to get up to 70 miles an hour going in reverse. I mean, you won't go very fast until that trailer gets off a little bit, and then it wants to whip around, right? And that's kind of the same reason. That's kind of the same thing with shallowing out the club. We got to get, in order for it to be stable and to be able to feel where it is, and for it to kind of work the way that we want it to, we have to have the force in front of it kind of leading it the whole way. If it gets out in front, then we've got to do some sort of compensation, like backing in a trailer, right, to be able to get that to work. And you can imagine doing that at fast speeds, how difficult that's going to be. Just like if you were backing up a trailer at fast speeds, basically impossible, right? So it's the same kind of thing. All right, let's keep the questions coming. We got 20, not quite 20 minutes left. So Drew says, every now and then the dreaded shanks, hate to even type it, comes along. Is there a quick fix? Well, the quick fix is just trying to hit the ball off the toe. That's the quick fix. Change your feel to trying to hit the ball off the toe, and that should move the strike more in the center of the face. If it's still in the hosel or in the heel, then I just exaggerate it even more. I'd maybe even try to feel like you're hitting it off the end of the toe, hitting a toe shank. I'd maybe even try to feel like you're doing that. But usually, if you take that feel, it's going to move that strike more in the center of the face. Beyond that, you'd want to look at your swing. It's possible you could be standing too close to the golf ball, so you want to give yourself space for your arms to work through. So if you stand really, really close, you're going to tend to hit the ball off of the heel. So give yourself space. There are players out there that stand really close to the golf ball. So Furyk, Rom, right? Those guys stand close to the golf ball, but they clear space. They're like this. And when they come down in the downswing, they are clearing space, right? They really, really create a lot of space for their hands to work through. And that's why that works for them. But if that's something that's difficult for you to do, then I definitely recommend giving yourself, a little bit of space. So I like to see about a fist, a space here between your thighs and in the end of the club. And that allows your hands to space. So that'd be something I'd be looking at. And the other things I'd be looking at are you taking away space in the downswing? So early extension. This is something that we see very, very often in amateur players. We talked about shallowing out the club a minute ago. Well, early extension is a means of shallowing out the club. Because if you look here, if I'm coming down and look, if I change my body inclination by thrusting my hips forward, right? Look what happens to the club. It shallows out, right? But that takes away space for my hands to kind of work through, and that can lead to hosel strikes, right? So if you have early extension, I'd be really working on trying to create space for your hands. Really try to feel like you're pushing the hips back, the chest down. Feel like you're more in your heels in the start of the downswing, really pushing those hips back and the chest down to create that space for your hands to work through. The last piece would be looking at your swing direction, right? If you're swinging very much from the inside, that center of the face is the sweet spot's kind of working out away from you a lot. And if that is the case, you will tend to hit the ball off the hosel, right? Because it's working away from you so much. So if you are swinging too much from the inside, and sometimes that goes hand in hand with the early extension, right? So if I'm steep, and then I really thrust forward, that clubs can work very much from the inside, and I can end up getting those shanks. So those would be the things I'd be looking at. Maybe feel like you stay in your posture, and maybe feel like you're swinging over the top a little bit. Try to hit some big pulls or slices, and then just ease off it a little bit to get that to get it evened out. So Deb C says, I watched Clay's video of the course he's working on. How will this course differ from the ball striking masterclass, which I went almost through with you? Um, so let's understand what the ball striking masterclass is. The ball striking masterclass is a skill building course. So the new course that Clay's working on for shallowing, it's a technique based course. So there's basically two things, right? There's technique and there's skill. There's also kind of like the mental game too, but for the most part, we have technique and skill when it comes to improving at golf. So technique is the way that you move, right? That's the top speed golf system. That's shallowing out the club, right? That's strengthening the grip. That's all technical based kind of thing. It's the way that you move. The ball striking masterclass is a skill based course, which goes over drills that help you to control the way that you move. Right now, they're both driven by each other. If your technique is good, it's a heck of a lot easier to control the way that you move. So, for example, right, if you are someone, what we were talking about, if you have a lot of early extension, if you come down steep in the transition, and then to compensate for that, you stand up and you flip the club, you shallow it out later, you're more dependent on timing. It's much harder to develop the skill of controlling things. But if you get this club shallowing out earlier, you stay in your posture, right? And you rotate through and you keep this club traveling behind your hands. If you have that going well from a technical standpoint, you will have a much easier time with building the skill, because it's going to be a heck of a lot easier to control those things, right? So that's really what the difference is. One is a technical based course where you're working on your technique, the way that you move. And the ball striking masterclass is a skill-based course where you're working on your ability to control the way that you move. Both are needed. Most players who have a very good technique, so like Torrell, they're doing mostly stuff like the ball striking masterclass. And if you're someone that does not want to work on technique, because technique can be a very difficult thing to change, right? Because you're changing the way that you move. So some players don't want to do that. So it's, all they do is ball striking type things. And that if you're in that boat, then I would just be working on the ball striking masterclass. If you're not someone who wants to put in the hard work of making a technical change to your swing. Now there are some technical changes that basically need to happen if you want to be any good. If you are coming down over the top, chopping down into the golf ball, you have to change that if you want to be any good. It's just going to be very, very difficult for you to. You can control a slice, I suppose, but it's just going to make it very, very difficult. So most players just aren't going to have the skill or ability level to be able to do that. But most better players are working on ball striking type stuff because their technique is already pretty good. All right, so we got about 10 minutes left if we have any more questions. So Robert K says, in my video lesson, often most arms really need to keep rotating, helping me along the next round. Do you see this a big key for AMs? In my video lesson, offhand comment that most AMs really need to keep rotating, helps me a lot the next round. It just depends on the player. Not all players really need to focus on that. it really just depends on the player. But yeah, I would say most amateurs aren't really using their legs and their core very much. They're kind of swinging all arms. So yeah, I definitely think this is what we talk about in the power turn course. Is turning back and through the ball, rotating the body. So yeah, it's very very important. That's why it's part of the top speed golf system. That's really what the power turn is: turning back and through the ball. So David says, could you please explain the basic ideas that would be explored in a putter fitting? Um, David, this really isn't my expertise. So honestly, I'm not really exactly sure. I'm not a club fitter, but what I will say, the keys to putting are getting the ball started online and having the right pace, right, and having the right speed. So there's lots of things that go into that. So what they're going to do is they're going to try to find the correct loft for you, right? That's really, really important because if we have too much loft on the putter, then you'll get backspin and then the ball's not going to roll right, right? And if you get too much, if you get too little loft on the putter, then it's going to kind of hit the ball into the ground, right? And then it's going to bounce off the ground. So they're going to definitely try to get you in the right loft. They're also going to try to find the correct weighting of the putter, right? So there's lots of weighting systems. There's toe hang putters, there's face balance putters. There's all kinds of different things, and a lot of it depends on your stroke. Do you have more of a straight back, straight through kind of stroke, or do you have more of an arcing stroke? Typically, more of an arcing stroke is going to be more of a toe down putter, and more of a straight back, a putter that helps you see what straight is. If the putter that you're using doesn't allow you to see what straight looks like, then you need to have there's lines. Sometimes there's putters with no lines. So people like to see straight by looking at the how square the face is. Some people like to see straight by looking at the line, right? I personally like to have a line on the top of my putter. It helps me see more what straight is. So yeah, that's basically. They're also going to put you in the right length of putter, right? So in some games, if you're someone who's standing over top of the golf ball, you have a really short putter and you kind of stand really close and over the top of the ball and you're kind of looking at it this way, and that doesn't allow you to see what straight is, then they might try to put you in a longer putter where you're standing a little bit farther away from it, so that way you can see more what straight is, right? So those are just a couple things. Mainly, they want you to see what straight is, so that way you can get it on the right line. They want you to be able to putt the ball straight by having the correct weighting and everything with the putter. And then they also, want to get the ball rolling really well. So that has to do with the weighting and the loft of the putter and things like that. So that's basically typically what's going to be with that. And then outside of that, it's more, personal preference, like the grip that you use, the the look of the head, right? Those are all kind of things that go into that. So Tom M says, can you repeat the apps, PC or smartphone that can analyze pro golf swings? Example, straight line from the ball to trail shoulder, etc. I think you mentioned View on Golf, but I may have misunderstood View. So V1 would be one. V1, that's an app that's for Android and Apple, iPhone that you can use. It's free. There is a paid version of it, but that's one that you can use. There's also V1 also has a desktop program. I'm not sure if it costs anything, but there is a desktop program that you can get as well. One that I really like, and this is only as far as a desktop program is concerned. One that I really like is called Analyzer Golf. It's only for Apple though, only on Apple computers. It's not a phone app. It's a program that's only for Apple computers. It's actually what I use for lessons nowadays. So yeah, Analyzer Golf is what's called, and it's spelled the same way as analyzer. You just take the E out of it. So instead of ZER, it's just ZR, Analyzer R Golf. So you can check that out. There is an instructor program and then there's a student program. I don't know exactly what the differences are. I don't know if you'll be able to analyze pro swings on the student version, but it could be, you can just go to their website and see if you have an Apple device. There's other ones out. I haven't really used any of them, so I don't know if you can analyze pro swings with them. But ones that I've heard people that like are Swing Profile. That's an app, again, Apple or Android phone. There is Coach Now, which is one that you can. I'm not sure if you can analyze pro swings on that, but it's a swing analyzer app. There's Coach's Eye, I believe that is available for Android or Apple phone. Trying to think. There's lots of them out there. Really, if you just search your app store for golf swing analyzer, you're going to find a bunch of them pop up. So there's a bunch out there. I've used Coach Now a little bit, just kind of testing it out. Swing Profile I haven't used, but I have a few students that have told me that they like it. I haven't used Coach's Eye, but I know that that's one that's out there too. But the ones I have used mostly are V1 Golf and Analyzer Golf. But Analyzer Golf is just for the Apple computer, so like a MacBook of some sort. All right, we'll go ahead and wrap it up right there. We'll be back tomorrow in 23 hours, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you all next time.